Hello, everyone. You're listening to Sinister Spotlight here at Mephisto's Castle. I'm Jose, and for those of you out there who are listening and who may not know what Sinister Spotlight is, it is a podcast that is going to be debuted regularly here at the site. And basically, what the essence of this show is that I invite a guest each episode to discuss a film or TV episode of their choosing. And basically, whatever they choose, it can either be a perennial favorite that everybody likes, or maybe it's something a little more obscure that many of us might not have heard about. And the guests will just be here to show their love and appreciation for that pick that they choose. I have with me today for our inaugural first episode, very excited to have the mad genius behind Strange Kids Club, Ron Scott. For those of you who don't know what Strange Kids Club is, I highly advise you go there as quick as you can. It is an insanely fun site and is the perfect spot for those of you who dig all things nostalgic and weird. Ron, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Jose.
All right, well, just wanted to let our listeners know that the film Ron chose for us tonight is very appropriately strange, and it is none other than The Forbidden Zone from 1982. It's a film by Richard Elfman, who a lot of you probably know as Danny Elfman's brother, who we'll actually get to in a second here, but Ron chose The Forbidden Zone for our first choice, and like I said before, it is very bizarre, which we'll delve into more as the episode goes on. So, to kind of get us started, I just want to ask you, Ron, what is, for the benefit of our listeners here, what is the essence of Forbidden Zone? What is, as far as you can describe it, the story, and basically, what exactly happens in this thing?
That's a dangerous question, man.
I realize that. Unfortunately, some people out there don't realize just what we're getting into. So, well,
I figured, for the inaugural podcast, just popping your cherry instead of taking it nice and slow, we'll just kind of rip it open for people. So
nice. I like your style.
The Forbidden Zone is basically it's more of a cult film. It's I actually found about it just by chance, and like you said, it was directed by Richard Elfman, and it's really bizarre. It's half comedy, half musical,
right?
Almost in a stage style as opposed to a film style.
Yes.
And really, I mean, there's so many characters and they're so weird, but the basic plot, if you want to call it a plot, it's
for the sake of humanity, let's just call it that, and just go from there.
It's a lot similar to Alice in Wonderland. You have a main character and Frenchie, and she gets sucked into this forbidden zone, or the sixth dimension. And as she goes through the sixth dimension, there's I don't want to call him a midget king, but a small person king.
To be politically correct about it here.
And a busty queen that looks like she probably came off of Pink Flamingos from John Waters.
Oh my God, yes, you're absolutely right.
Some kind of weird ass frog butler.
Yeah, bust rod.
Danny Elfman makes an appearance as the devil.
Yes.
There's animation. There's people dropping out of anuses with pillows, and man, it's pretty insane. It's a pretty insane story.
Yeah, you pretty much wrapped it all up into one bizarre bag, and that's pretty much what it is. It's just a grab bag of all these surreal, kind of wacky elements, but in the end, it surprisingly works in its own strange way altogether quite nicely.
It does. It's very art house. It would be something that I could see Warhol directing.
Yeah, very much so. Especially if kind of imagine if like one of those one of the horror movies you produced, like Blood for Dracula or Flesh for Frankenstein. Just imagine if that was kind of a wacky musical, and you kind of got the right idea, I guess. But you mentioned before that you kind of just happened upon this movie by chance. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, it was kind of weird. I had a new club member that joined on Facebook for Strange Kids Club, and I noticed a couple of his pictures. He's a collage artist. His name's Devin.
Oh, okay.
So I started asking him. I thought maybe it was a David Lynch film. The pictures that I saw.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that.
And when I asked him, he told me the name of the film, which was, of course, Forbidden Zone. And so I was like, dude, what's that? I've never heard of that. And he showed me a clip, basically a trailer that had, all this crazy ass crap, bundled into like a minute package.
Is that the same one you actually showed to me?
It was.
Wow, it's kind of like passing the Forbidden Zone torch. That's how you soak everybody into the weird chemicals going on there.
It's kind of like having cooties in high school, man. You just kind of touch somebody and it spreads like a disease.
Apparently, yeah, and what a disease it is.
But yeah, man, I saw that trailer, and as crazy as it was, of course, being a strange kid, I had to have it, man. So I tracked it down on Amazon, and I ordered it like 2-day shipping. And I saw it, and I was like, what the fuck did I just watch?
Everybody's first reaction, I guess.
But yeah, it was all thanks to this guy named Devin.
Wow.
And,
yeah, that's really something. See, and I was kind of under the impression that I didn't realize that you had seen this as as recently as you did. I was under the impression that this was a film that you might have unfortunately caught a glimpse of when you were a young, impressionable child, and then it just warped your life forever. Oh, I didn't realize that it was a recent find of yours. I guess it goes to say something about how profound an impact it might have had on you that you decided to choose it for our podcast here.
I've always been a stickler for oddballs, and I figured this one would be something that most of your viewers probably haven't heard of or haven't seen, or maybe they saw it and didn't know it.
Right. Well, that's exactly what it was like for me. I remember seeing the pictures of Danny Elfman in the Satan getup, and always thinking, "Wow, that seems like a kind of a weird film. I'll have to, get down to watching it one day." So, thanks to you, by the way, I finally did see it, and yeah, I might go on to explain later. I actually really, really enjoyed it in my own twisted little way. But
yeah.
Oh no, sorry, go on.
When I saw the trailer, you kind of think like art house film, maybe horror film. I know we both have that in common as far as being horror fans.
Right.
And it is kind of horrific in a way, but it's more, I don't know, it's more of an abstract horror film.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, that's kind of a pretty accurate way to describe it, because horrific things happen in the movie. Particularly what came to my mind the minute you said that was sorry if this is a spoiler, if you can even consider anything that happens in this movie a spoiler. One of the moments, the moment that came to my mind was when Squeeze It gets decapitated at the bequest of Satan, and not only does his head continue to live, as we see it singing after it's removed from its body, but it sprouts a pair of wings, and through the rest of the movie we see it just kind of randomly flying around, just kind of its own accord, not really paying much mind to anybody else, and seemingly having a great time. And yeah, it touches on some kind of icky stuff, and there's a lot of like questionable sexual acts performed in the movie, so it kind of touches on gross stuff like that, but in a way that it's almost kind of funny in a totally, dare I say, existential way.
Most definitely. It's like watching 6 different shows, and somehow they all end up relating to each other.
Yeah, that, and from what I read, that's more or less exactly how it kind of came out, because like I said, from what I've read, the movie was filmed basically as all these random vignettes, if you can call them that, occurring within this world, and the main plot of this journey into the sixth dimension was just constructed to basically act as the Elmer's glue for the movie and just kind of paste everything together. So yeah, you're absolutely right in saying that it's almost like, they're completely non-sequential happenings that just happen to be held together by this paper-thin plot, which is not an offense to it. It works for the type of medium it's working in.
It does. Somehow in the end, you kind of get, you have a beginning and a middle and an end, but it's just not clear what happened.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's an experience. You remember the events leading up to it, and everything in between is just a horrifying blur. And then at the end, you're just left with this shocked feeling, almost like you've been slapped in the face with a fish, and you take a few minutes to think to yourself, and then you finally say, wow, that was weird, but damn it all, that was kind of fun, too. So it's definitely an experience. If you can call the Forbidden Zone anything, after watching it, I probably wouldn't even call it a movie. It's an experience, much like a lot of other films in this type of vein. But yeah, you also mentioned in your description of the movie that it seems to have a few influences from Alice in Wonderland. And yeah, you can definitely see that in some of the motifs in the movie, and like something almost as obscure, you would think, as the bald Monsieur characters that you see like in the boxing ring. They almost kind of look like Tweedledee and Tweedledum in appearance, and there are other things that kind of parallel Alice in Wonderland in a weird way.
You're right, man. I hadn't thought about that. That is Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Yeah, and it's weird, just and the half human, half animal characters, and then I remember you mentioned in a previous discussion the twisted royalty that kind of rules this world. You got the practically psychotic queen, and there's the kind of well, he's horny in this case, but the kind of lackadaisical king. And yeah, and it almost makes you wonder, do you, I'm asking you right now, do you personally think that maybe some of these decisions were consciously made, or it really just kind of happened, like a lot of things in this movie seem to?
I think knowing what you said about filming it separately, and just seeing the feel of how it's more of an art house kind of film, I would think that they're all intentional. Right. But of course, it's on a much more surreal level. Art house is probably the way that I would best describe it, just because there is a plot and there are characters, and it does make sense to a degree, but there's a deeper meaning, I think, hidden behind everything.
Yeah, well, see, that's something I kind of wanted to touch on as well. When I watched this movie, and maybe it's just me, I'm too thick to look past all the wacky going-ons, but do you think that I thought at first that the things that happen in this movie are just absurd for absurdity's sake? I didn't personally think that there was any type of deeper meaning, like you mentioned, whether it be political or religious or anything like that. I personally didn't think there was any meaning behind the majority of the images, at least. Did you pick up on any type of particular definition or hidden message, like you said?
Well, yes and no. It's a very difficult film to explain or to find any kind of meaning from. But
right, of course.
I do see instances of racial profiling. Whether that was intentional as a parody, or maybe as a statement that Richard was making. Of course, there's we already talked about Alice in Wonderland, and there's allusions to Dante's Inferno a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Traveling down basically to hell.
Yeah, yeah.
The Forbidden Zone does have a very hellish kind of atmosphere, and of course, you've got Danny Elfman as the devil. So
Which is awesome.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's touches, and I think if people sat and kind of picked it apart, they could definitely pick up different elements here and there.
Hmm.
But without seeing more of Richard's films, I think he does have a couple other films. Without seeing more of them, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell.
Right. No, yeah, that's an excellent point, because I guess in a sense you really can't get a feel or at least a sense of what a filmmaker's intentions, whether they be conscious or subconscious, what those may be, until you kind of take in a good portion of their resume, and that's when you start picking up on their recurring themes and all that type of stuff. So no, you bring up a very excellent point by saying that.
Yeah, and I know he's done, after I saw the film, of course, I wanted to know what else he had done.
What else has this maniac done?
Exactly. How else could he traumatize me?
But wait, there's more.
He's done a couple of films from what I could tell, but really the only one that's really of note would be, I think it's called Shrunken Heads,
Right.
which is supposed to be, I guess, another spoof on horror films. And I haven't been able to find it, but I mean, it looks like it has more of a linear storyline than Forbidden Zone for sure.
Right, right. Oh no, yeah, who knows? Maybe that'll be the subject of a future Sinister Spotlight. Hopefully in our distant future, but who knows? Who knows at this point? But I also yeah, you mentioned the blackface that's somewhat prominent in the movie. Yeah, when I saw that, I'll admit it, I found it quite amusing. Just because, it was played, for laughs as far as I was able to tell. And I thought it was, somewhat comical. I personally, I thought that maybe it wasn't so much as trying to convey some type of message, but it is more in alliance with what you mentioned earlier. It has a lot of stagey elements, and I think what one reason of that may be was because the Elfmans were part of this theater troupe, which were actually named the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo, and it was like kind of an avant-garde type of theater troupe, and then this film more or less sort of developed from that. So I think, like you mentioned, there are a lot of theatrical type touches, and when I saw the blackface, I was thinking it's more type of, they're kind of playing around with different, theater genres, like, this is them doing a minstrel show, and then when they incorporate all the, the 30s jazz hits that are in the soundtrack for the movie. It's, kind of like vaudeville type of stuff. So that's the type of thing, connotation that I thought the blackface was in personally.
I could see that, I guess. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Now, the beginning did take me back a little bit. I was a little nervous when I first saw it, but like you said, once they keep going and the story evolves, you can kind of get more of a feel that they know what they're doing, and they're kind of using it for gags.
Right.
And then it leads into a great animation.
Oh yeah.
I was trying to think of the animator's name. I think it's John Muto, I think.
John Muto. You're right. I will say you are certainly right, because I have no idea.
I think that's his name, but it really took me back to like the old Flesher cartoons.
Yeah.
Black and whites. Kind of a hellish. Flesher meets. Crap! I'm having a total brain freeze right now. But definitely vintage animation style, and it was pretty freaking cool.
No, yeah, it's an awesome opening to the movie. With the like you said, it's kind of like it prepares you for what's to come. It's descending into the underworld, and you see these really detailed and just plain kooky animations, like the skeletons watching TV and their heads fall off, and you see tentacles coming out of the sewage pipe. Just some awesome stuff. And if you're a geek for this type of thing, then it's like cream, and you're a cat. You're just drawn to it, and you lap it up. It's just so cool. But Like you just touched on the animation. One of the other segments from the film that I was really taken with was it also has to kind of do with the descent into the sixth dimension. It's particularly when you see the characters enter the basement of the Hercules household, and they go through the mouth. It looks like through the digestive system of the earth, I guess, apparently. And it's really cool because the way in which it's animated, it's like the photographic cutouts moving in these stilty, jerky motions, and it reminded me of Terry Gilliam from Monty Python. It's got that kind of look to it, and of course, me personally being a fan of them, it was definitely cool to see something like that in there.
Oh, that was so cool, man. I was just thinking, it kind of brought me back to, like you said, Terry Gilliam and, stuff that you would see on MTV back in the 90s, Liquid Television
Yeah.
and Cartoon Sushi, stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's unique in that it takes, I don't mean to get too deep in, in this whole artsy fartsy type thing. We're talking Forbidden Zone here, people, but it it it's kind of cool because it takes these practically lifelike pictures of the characters, where they're almost to the point that they're photographic, which for all I know they are, and it just animates them in this way that makes it totally unreal and surreal. I don't know if I just contradicted myself by saying those two things. Who knows? But and just for instance, when you see a photographic cutout of a character being fed into a digestive system and for some reason is fingered by a mechanical hand, it just elicits this particular emotion from you that I guess can't be put into words. You just kind of have to see it, and then you instinctively feel it in your soul. And that is probably the most profound statement I'm going to attempt to make in discussing this movie.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like that feeling.
No, yeah, I'm sure that there's nothing quite like the feeling that they probably felt in that moment. So, but no, there's just so many. Then it's it's one of the things about a film like this. There are just so many random occurrences that happen in it that we could literally probably just sit here and pinpoint each and every one of them, and then we giggle a little bit and say, "Oh, that was cool," and then we move on to the next one. But if we are going to do that, I will say I love that they used a guy in a gorilla suit because that is one of the things that is always guaranteed to make me happy, along with like cheeseburgers and yeah, cheeseburgers is all that comes to mind. So, guy in a gorilla suit equals cheeseburgers for me.
Well, what did you think about the classroom scene, man?
The classroom scene, pretty hilarious. Not only, excuse me, during one of the classroom scenes, do they have that infectious ABC song, which I think is from a Three Stooges short. But one of my favorite parts about the classroom is that we get the opportunity to take a glance at the characters that populate this world, and not only do we have these two girls, apparently, but they are actually grown men in drag who have these rubber bands stretching their noses back, and it makes them look like Lon Chaney from The Phantom of the Opera. But we also have this gang of 70s era pimps in the corner who are constantly playing craps, and one of them ends up getting shot, and it's just a ridiculous moment, and it just made me insanely happy. The classroom scenes are definitely one of the highlights from the movie.
Yeah, it's probably the first scene where I actually kind of perked up a little bit and started to understand it a little bit, or at least was entertained by it.
Right, as far as understanding this movie is you can go, really. But yeah, I think that's kind of like the turning point. It seemed like it was the same for me because in the beginning you're just inundated with all these crazy things going on. People are dancing and singing at the dinner table and are lip syncing to Cab Calloway, and it just hits you at first, but yeah, that classroom scene, it's like the transitional point where you're like, okay, so this is the type of thing that happens. I think I'm okay with this. At least I think I am.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of once you're that far into it, you have to kind of be okay with
Yeah,
it.
if you're not, then there's no hope for you. You're just going to be pummeled. You're going to be visually pummeled for the remainder of the film with all these things that just get more and more weirder by the minute. So, yeah, if you don't make it there, then you might as well pack up and go home. But touching on another aspect of the movie that we talked about in a previous conversation, it's speaking of the music, I found it pretty cool how you have like the 30s jazz hits that we talked about earlier, like Cab Calloway and the like. You have that in the soundtrack, and then you introduce the 80s electronic sound of Oingo Boingo, and believe it or not, it kind of meshes and gels, and it eventually works out, and they kind of actually complement each other in a weird way.
It really does, and I was kind of an Oingo Boingo fan, going into the film,
Yeah.
and after seeing it, I really wanted to hear some more of their stuff.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah.
It really contributes to the film. The film, I don't think, would be half as entertaining if it didn't have the type of music that's in it.
Yeah, and it's, when I say 80s electronic sound, the Oingo Boingo as a band does have that, but you also got to keep in mind that they're Oingo Boingo, and they're led by Danny Elfman, so even though it may have a similar sound, it's not really the type that you wouldn't hear Oingo Boingo probably on the radio. Basically, is what I'm saying. Just because they are they take the type of the type of vibe in this movie and basically flesh it out, so to speak, in a musical form. So that type of thing, really, you wouldn't expect to hear on a top 40s, chart hits. So it has the 80s electronic sound, but it's the uniqueness and kind of bizarre quality of Oingo Boingo that I think works so well for the movie.
Most definitely, man. I think it could probably make the top 40 in hell or something,
Yeah. And it's the top 40 in hell, and all the songs are Oingo Boingo. and maybe one Katy Perry song. But, they mostly Oingo Boingo.
That's towards the bottom 40.
Yeah, well, yeah, depending on your perspective of it, I guess. Yeah, exactly. But, yeah, like, and it's kind of interesting, too, mentioning Danny Elfman, because the scene that I mentioned just now at the dinner table when Pa Hercules is lip-syncing to Cab Calloway, the first thing that came to my mind was that the scene seemed kind of eerily reminiscent of the Deo scene from Beetlejuice when the family gets up and they start chanting the Deo song and they're dancing around the table. So kind of like what we mentioned with Richard, where as a filmmaker you kind of have to watch his movies to get a grasp of the things that show up. It's kind of the same for Danny, because some of the little musical cues from Forbidden Zone kind of pop up in other movies, and particularly the very beginning of the Forbidden Zone theme song. It sounds a lot like I'm not sure which one it was, but there's a song he did for the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie that kind of starts off with that weird, I don't know how to describe it, basically the chanting noise that you hear at the beginning of the Forbidden Zone song. It kind of, all these different things pop up later in his later movies that he does.
Yeah, I mean, with somebody like Danny, who's done so many films. I mean, you've got Nightmare Before Christmas, and like you said, the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I mean, just countless others. He's always seemed to be able to adapt to different films and different styles, with still having that signature sound. And in the Forbidden Zone, he really gets to cut loose with that. I mean, he's just all over the place, but it works. It melds together.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right, and trying not to get too far off, the topic of the Forbidden Zone, but I think it's very true what you said about how, and it's always cool when any artist, I think, is able to do this, well, I should say, how Danny Elfman is able to adapt to all these different films, but yet still maintain his own unique sound. And the one piece that, if you were to watch this movie and be told this is Danny Elfman's music, you would probably have no idea that that was the same guy who wrote the Ice Dance piece from Edward Scissorhands, which is probably one of the most beautiful things that I've ever heard. It's such a gorgeous composition, and it's really cool to see how he can go from one spectrum, with the one end being hell, and into heaven with the Ice Dance. So it's always cool to see an artist able to make that type of transition, I think.
For sure, and that's why I was kind of interested in seeing what else Richard had done, to see if maybe there was some kind of I don't know, secret code to the film that he was working under. But I mean, as far as I could tell, this was just him being Richard Elfman. It's weird like that, but I think they definitely made one hell of a team.
Yeah, well, I guess, strangeness runs in the family. But, yeah, and like I mentioned before, just getting back to Danny really quick, I can't express how much I love, and I truly thank you for showing me the movie just to be able to see the scene of Danny Elfman as Satan, because it's it's probably the coolest thing I've seen in a while, and I've played the video over and over again on YouTube. I'm probably responsible for at least its past 100 hits, and it's just such a cool scene, especially for you horror fans out there. It is probably the most horror eccentric scene in the entire movie. I guess it goes without saying since Satan is around. But basically, he's dressed up like this jazz nightclub owner, and Danny Elfman is just kooky, and you can tell he's having so much fun as being the devil, and he's just this lecherous guy who wants to get his dirty paws all over the topless princess, which we failed to mention. There is a princess in the movie who is topless throughout the whole thing, so if none of what we have talked about so far has drawn you to it, there you go. But yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know how we could have forgotten that, but
I know
yeah.
it's kind of sad. Here we are talking about all this artsy stuff, and we forgot to talk about the girl who has her boobs hanging out the entire movie. What kind of men are we? But no, that obviously does have its pluses to it, two to be exact. But yeah, it creates some nice eye candy for the moments that she's on screen. But yeah, just to wrap up what I was saying before, it's such a fun scene, and you get to see Danny Elfman as Satan. He orders his undead slaves to decapitate this poor soul. He basically rapes a princess, or prepares to at least, and then the last thing we see of him, he's like, he's playing this piano so evilly, and he's leering into the camera, and you hear like these crypt keeper cackles behind him, and I can't. It's just I get chills explaining it.
It's definitely something that I could see somebody taking and making a Halloween mix out of.
Oh my God, you have no idea. I already have plans to put it on my tape. I just have that on a constant loop for all my Halloween parties. Yeah, that stuff is great, and I can't tell you how much I love it. But I know we've kind of touched on some deeper aspects concerning this movie already, and I guess we'll kind of delve into a little further into that with this question here. I wanted to ask you, and this gravitates a little bit away from the particular movie we're talking about, but we're still kind of concerned with the essence of it. I wanted to ask you, as the creator and caretaker of Strange Kids Club, what do you think is the appeal that these surreal type movies have for people. Why do you think that in the long run we're all kind of attracted to the strange?
You get deep on me, man.
I know, I know. Pass that one. I need a smoke now. So, but we're getting deep here. We're getting deep.
I think it's probably something inside each of us that whether we accept it or not, like to rebel against the normal or the mainstream. In a case like a film like this, maybe it appeals more towards artists or film lovers than it would your typical Joe Schmo. But there's still things within the film that I think that they could pick up on and still would be entertained by. It's with Strange Kids Club, I think that the commonality that kind of works there is people sharing little geeky, nerdy memories of growing up in the '80s, or even kids now that can remember and enjoy the old He-Man or Thundercats or stuff that people don't ordinarily just go around promoting all the time, but that they can kind of feel like they can have their own group. And I think it's important for people to have that feeling, whether they recognize it or not, to belong to something, whether it's being a strange kid or being into church or into movies or into video games. Everybody likes ultimately to belong to something.
Right. Well, that's an equally deep answer to my deep question, and and wonderfully articulated. That's again, I think you're absolutely right, and it's almost kind of ironic, particularly with what we're talking about, that you mention we have this inner desire almost to seek out the strange, the things that may be taboo or even forbidden, no pun intended, seriously. And, we seek these things out, and by doing so, I don't mean to sound too dramatic about it, but it kind of separates us from the quote-unquote normal crowd. But, like you mentioned, everybody, whether they're into sports or strangeness, everybody needs that sense of belonging. So even those who seek these type of things out, which I guess you could say by their very nature tend to ostracize some people, maybe even those especially, people of that nature especially, need to have some type of bond with each other, at least with like-minded people, in order to just have a sense of belonging and camaraderie with others.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, a film like this, or, going back to, earlier in the interview, work by people like John Waters or David Lynch or, creative people like that, they're pretty freaking strange, but every single one of them have their own cult following, Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Very good example.
Another case, I know that you had mentioned that before. I mean, there's some similarities there, and Rocky has a very deep, cult following. I mean, they put on stage plays, and it's all independent, and this kind of falls in that same kind of category.
Yeah, it definitely does, and it's interesting that you bring that up too, because when people say cult film or this film has a cult following, I think it's a tendency of people to immediately think of something like Rocky Horror or a John Waters film or Eraserhead or any number of David Lynch's films, and it's funny, kind of, in an ironic way, that's the type of movie people think of when you say cult film, because when you say cult, you think group of people who follow this movie, And, it makes one wonder, at least it makes me wonder, can't any movie have a cult following? Can't, Jesus, can't, like...
Now, Jesus has a cult following.
Yeah, Jesus has a massive cult following. I hear he's got, like, I don't know, maybe, like, 300 friends on Facebook. He's doing pretty good, for a martyr, I guess. But no, I wasn't talking about Jesus, but he does have a massive cult following, which that is probably the subject of a completely unrelated and totally different podcast. But no, just a film like Sweet Home Alabama or something like that. Those movies have fans too. What I'm trying to say, at least, and bringing this point up, is people tend to think of strange movies when they hear cult following, but like I said, it makes you wonder, can't normal movies have a following of sorts? There are at least 1,000 people that like Lawrence of Arabia, but you don't see Lawrence of Arabia being called a cult film. It's just called a classic, so, I mean, what do you think about that?
It's a pretty interesting point. I've never really looked at it from that point of view, but I mean, you're right. Any film that has, to me, I guess a cult following would be a smaller group, whereas
Okay.
something like The Matrix, I wouldn't say that had a cult following, but I could definitely see smaller films, Sweet Home Alabama, or
Yeah, that probably wasn't the best example. I was just, for some reason, I wanted to use a romantic comedy example, and Reese Witherspoon kept popping into my head like she always does. And yeah, that was unfortunately just my first example.
Maybe Loverboy.
Yeah, there you go.
Back in the 80s, that could be a cult film.
Yeah, everybody wearing the red leather pants. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Let me think of another one. Super Mario Brothers, the live action movie. That could be a cult film.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And people also, I should mention, people probably also think cult film is somewhat equivalent of meaning a kind of a bad film, which in that case they'd be precisely right.
I think a lot of people associate it too with mostly horror films for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But like you brought up, with Super Mario Brothers, or romantic comedy or what have you, it's not limited to the horror genre.
Oh, of course. But no, I just that we kind of we kind of went off on a tangent of my original question, but I think it's interesting to consider that, and not looking for any definite answers here, but that's I guess for our listeners maybe to ponder on their own and maybe write to us if they feel a need, probably with death threats, but hey, a letter's a letter, I guess. But no, it's something. It's food for thought, I guess.
Yeah, we're just going freestyle, just like the Forbidden Zone.
Oh yeah, definitely. We're just we're just pulling anything out of the hat. Who cares what it is? But I also wanted to ask you. I found this in my research, if you want to use such a word, into the movie, that apparently, now mind you, this it's on IMDb, but they've been known to make some mistakes before. But apparently, when I was looking up Richard Elfman's filmography, there are plans to make a sequel to Forbidden Zone, and it's going and it's going to be called Forbidden Zone 2: The Forbidden Galaxy. Apparently, that's the title that they're going with so far. And basically, from what I gathered, the plot is that the Midget King of the Underworld, which I'm not sure if it's going to be the same one, being that the actor has since passed away, or maybe his wicked stepbrother or something, but basically some midget king, or excuse me, some little person king of the underworld is trying to overtake Earth, and whether or not he enlists the aid of Satan or any such nonsense like that remains to be seen. But I didn't know if you had heard that at all, and I wanted to get your feedback on the possibility, at least, of a sequel to Forbidden Zone.
No, man, this is news to me.
Well, you sound so excited by it too.
That was, I mean, it would be awesome, but I don't know if you could top the first one as far as just how freaking crazy it could be.
Yeah, you're definitely that's a good point. It almost it almost be the same thing, I think, at least, as trying to make a sequel to Rocky Horror. I mean, what can you possibly do in a new movie that really wasn't touched on in the one that preceded it?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. Unless they did it in 3D, man. Because everything's got to be in 3D now.
Yeah, obviously they're gonna, make a sequel to Sweet Home Alabama, and that's gonna be in 3D. And if Reese Witherspoon is in it, then I'm all for that. I don't got, I don't have any qualms for that. And if they're going to make a sequel to Forbidden Zone, getting back to what we mentioned about the princess, then I'm sure they'll make a killing if they put that into 3D.
Somebody will poke an eye out, man.
Yeah, no. You could go blind seeing that movie.
That's like a Richard Castle advertisement.
Yeah,
Go see this movie.
Guarantees to, yeah, they'll put like guarantees to pay all medical bills for anyone who's poked in the eye by an erect nipple. Guarantee we'll pay all of your medical bills and we'll get you a new bionic eye. You'll be set for life.
If you suffer an erection for over 48 hours, we will return your ticket money.
Exactly. Exactly. Only Forbidden Zone would have a guarantee like that. But I mean, other than the reason you just mentioned, is there maybe any what would, if this movie, through the grace of our Dark Lord Satan, if this movie were to get made, what would be the draw for you other than nipples in 3D?
Well, 3D nipplage is mighty enticing.
It is. But let's hypothetically say that the nipples were never in the conversation to begin with. What would have to be done to make you see this movie?
I think just the fact that it would be finished and made, I'd have to see it at least to see what it's like.
Yeah.
It's it's kind of like a cold. You can't get rid of it until you've seen it all the way through.
Yeah, kind of getting back to the cooties you mentioned before. You just kind of have to sit it out and just see what it's like. Or maybe a more accurate connotation would be to say it's like the chicken pox. It's best just to get it done with now than seeing what the terrible aftermath may come of it years on down the road.
Exactly. And I mean, I don't know. Being news, I don't know if Oingo Boingo would be involved or Danny Elfman would be involved, but I mean, just even thinking about that kind of talent getting back together again would, that would be enough of a drive to go see it.
Yeah, that would definitely be it. And on the cast list, Danny Elfman is on the cast list as Devil, but next to it says rumored. That's the IMDb cock tease of every movie fan out there. When you see that your favorite actor or actress's name next to a character name and next to it says rumored, it's like, oh God, that's cinematic blue balls right there.
For sure, man. I mean, that's. But I want to say for sure that's him. I can't even remember what the credits say now. I don't know if I completely watched all the credits after seeing the film.
I don't know if I could have gone through much of it much longer. But no, yeah, it would definitely definitely for me, I think it would definitely be to see Danny Elfman and company get back together for that movie. That would probably seal a deal for me, along with aforementioned erect nipples in 3D.
I think. Are you a Lonely Island fan?
I've listened to some. I've listened to some of their stuff. I know most of the music. But yeah, it's it's funny stuff. I'm usually the last one to hear it. Like everybody's singing the lyrics, and I ask, "What's that?" And people are like, "You live under a rock or something?" I'm like, "I guess."
If I could think of what the sequel might be like, I would equate it to maybe their song "Like a Boss." Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard of that one. I've heard most of their early stuff.
Just kind of off the wall. Screwing a fish.
I knew you were gonna mention that part.
Fly it into the
sun. Yeah, hey, maybe if the thing with Danny Elfman falls through, maybe we can get a Sandberg to be Satan. That would be interesting. But
that would be a good remake to do.
Yeah, I guess for the more contemporary audience, yeah, all the songs would probably be auto-tuned, but I guess there are some sacrifices we just have to make in the name of erect nipples. That joke is getting pretty old. I probably need to move on to some new material. But just we've kind of covered a lot of ground here, more than I probably thought a movie like this was possible. But not really. There's a lot of meat to go with a movie like this. But just to kind of wrap up this episode of Sinister Spotlight, I wanted to ask you in closing. You mentioned that this film is definitely not your favorite, which I think were your words, but you chose it to just to torture me, I think, honestly. But you say it's not your favorite, so I wanted to ask, what is your reason for choosing this for Sinister Spotlight? And kind of along those same lines, basically, why would you recommend this to anybody who didn't want to have their eyeballs raped?
I think you're pretty much close. I think I chose it probably 35% to fuck with you.
Well, it worked. Thank you very much.
And the other 65% because it's like having a secret decoder ring. You see something and it's just so crazy that you have to show somebody. And this film is very much like that. It's insane. And yes, most people probably will not watch it more than once. But if you can get them to watch it that one time just to get their reaction, it's completely worth it just for that.
I think you're absolutely right. But you mentioned decoder ring, and I think that's an accurate description. But for some reason, the only message I got was drink more Ovaltine, so I'm pretty pissed off about that. Gonna write my governor about that one. Goddamn Orphan Annie and her decoder rings. I think no, that's probably the exact same manner in which I would probably show this to friends and enemies of my own. So no, I think that's the perfect way to end this particular spotlight on Forbidden Zone. So as fun and crazy and arousing as the conversation has been, I think we will bring it to a close now. And if we didn't touch on some things that people wanted to hear, I think particularly with this movie, some things are best left to your imagination. And if we enticed you enough and done our job well, then you'll want to seek this one out without any further promises from either of us. So, Rondell, thank you so much for joining me for my first episode. Very brave of you, very brave of me for watching the movie in the first place, and it's been awesome, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, I appreciate you for having me, Jose.
Oh, well, no problem. Trust me, the honor is mine. And like I mentioned before, if you don't know what Strange Kids Club is, it's one of the coolest corners on the interwebs, and you'll probably not want to leave once you get there. And, I'll do a shameless plug for you. Please become a Clubhouse member, because we have some people in there who just cannot draw good finger paints for the life of them. So we really need some good finger painters in there to adorn our Clubhouse walls. So if that happens to be your particular talent, then by all means sign up. And if it's not, then sign up anyway. So yeah, thank you again, Ron, and thank you all for listening, if you're still here after this whole time, to this episode of Sinister Spotlight here at Mephisto's Castle. Have a good night, everyone. Say good night, Ron.
Keep it creepy, y'all.
Nice. Bye, everybody.